Today, let's make Korean barbecue, but vegan. All right, to start with, we're gonna set up a simmering liquid. And to do that, I'm going to take some water. And I'm gonna fill this pot, halfway or so. It only has to simmer for about 20 to 25 minutes, so I don't need that much, but that looks about right. That was 3/4 of a gallon, if anybody was really keeping track. To that, I'm going to add some beef bouillon powder. Now, this is the Better Than Beef flavoring. We'll have a link in the description to the exact brand. You can also use the Better Than Bouillon stuff or any beef flavoring that you like, really. That was 1 tablespoon of the beef bouillon. It's not super critical how much you use, but that was 1 tablespoon. And I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of tamari, or you can use soy sauce if you prefer. I just want to whisk that stuff through a little bit. It tends to clump a little. And then my special ingredient for this is actually Kirkland Organic No Salt Seasoning. If you don't have this, we did make no salt seasoning on the channel, and that works really well too. For this, I just like the Kirkland one. It's a little spicy, just a little bit, so I'm just going to put in a few shakes. It's basically like a tablespoon or so. Give that a whisk. Now I want to put this on the stove, on the burner, on like medium to medium high heat. We want it to be just boiling. Okay, so when I say just barely at a boil or a simmer, this is what I mean. We like our Korean barbecue over rice, and for that we're going to be using the Instant Pot to make our rice. I have here 1.5 cups of brown rice. This is to serve 3, so that's about how many we're going to get out of it. You do get a little bit more meat, but we're going to only use up some of that today, so just keep that in mind. To that 1.5 cups of rice, I'm going to add 1.5 cups plus 2 tablespoons of water. Swish that around a little bit, and I'm going to put that in my Instant Pot for 19 minutes on pressure and high. As you can tell, if you do everything right on this particular recipe, dinner's ready in about an hour or so. So next we want to make our barbecue meat for the barbecue of the Korean barbecue. And for that, I'm going to be doubling my original recipe. So bear with me if I sound like I'm stumbling over my words. I have 2 cups of vital wheat gluten here. To that, I'm going to add a 1/2 cup of chickpea flour. Now, that's a higher volume of chickpea flour than I normally use for a seitan, but it's because I want a little bit of a smoother texture for this one. I have 2 teaspoons of that beef bouillon that we used for the simmering liquid. Humidity always gets these. 2 teaspoons of smoked paprika. Now, if you don't have smoked, it's okay, but smoked is a little bit better, gives a little bit of that smoky flavor. If you do not have smoked paprika, you can add just like maybe 1/2 teaspoon of liquid smoke. 2 tablespoons of white wine vinegar. This is to help get rid of some of that VWG flavor that some people really object to in seitan. 1 teaspoon of sesame oil. Well, this is there for flavor. I mean, that's rather obvious. I love putting sesame oil into seitan, especially when it's an Asian-styled anything, or if there's a beefy requirement. That usually works really, really well. 2 tablespoons of tamari. I have 1.5 cups of water in this container. If I put all that water in here now, I could have a problem. So I'm only going to put about half that water just to make sure. Then I want to mix this around. If it seems too dry, I will add in the rest. Yes, I know I didn't make everything homogeneous before I added the water. It's just the way I do it. It's okay. You're going to mix this enough and knead it enough that it won't be a problem. And as you can see, it is very dry. I need more of that water. So I'm just going to dump half again in. Here's the thing. I can always add more water, but I can't get it back out once it's in there. Still looks a little bit too dry. Yep, gonna need all of it. Now, in this example, I did need all of it, but there have been other times where I didn't. So that's why I don't always add it all at once. Get everything mixed together and homogeneous. At a certain point, you just gotta use your hands. You can see it's starting to come together. It's holding together well. And all that liquid got soaked up. Let's get it out onto the board and we'll give it a pretty good knead. This one, I like it to have a little firmer texture, so I don't go too crazy with kneading it, but I do want a decent texture on it. You can see some of the coloration coming through. It doesn't come out exactly as dark as, say, a real meat product would be, but, you know, this isn't a real meat product. All right, after just a minute or 2 of kneading, you can see we have that texture that we look for in a seitan, where it's kind of like a membrane over the top when you start to stretch it like this. And I do, in fact, want to break this in half. and make two because, well, my pan isn't big enough to hold one big, huge, honking piece of seitan, and it just wouldn't cook quite the same. I like to have a little bit more edge to it, so I want to make a couple of steaks, if you will. And for that, I'm just literally forming it with my hands, pulling it out, pushing it together so that it forms a nice big piece. And I don't want them to be any more than, say, an inch or so thick. That one's bigger. Let's add him to that one. There we go. And if you do it right, it does actually hold together really, really well. You can just kind of knit them together. See that? It's like it was always part of it. The idea is you don't want, okay, see how this has like a lot of holes? This is more or less flat. I want to try to keep it together better. Makes just for a better consistency in the end. Okay, there's our two steaks. Ready for cooking. All right, so with a cast iron pan set over medium heat, give it a few minutes to heat up. We're looking for like 350 or so for temperature. Yes, I know it's flicking up to that 400 mark. I am going to use just a little bit of oil, but don't worry, it will not be staying in the recipe. Then grab one of our steaks and drop it in. You should hear sizzle immediately. If you don't, your pan wasn't hot enough and that could stick. That's why I try to use just the littlest oil I can to get away with it. I generally let these cook for, 3-4 minutes per side. Depends on the actual temperature of your pan, but you do not want them to burn. If you smell burning, flip it over. You've over caramelized your steaks. Now, if you notice, it's sticking right now, but see, it's starting to come loose. As it cooks more, it comes loose from that pan. I usually just start checking it after a couple of minutes. I'm looking for a nice golden brown, maybe even a couple of darker brown spots are okay. And I just want to separate that from the pan and give it a flip. Okay, that's looking pretty good. It could have actually gone just a little bit longer, but it's okay. What we're doing by cooking the seitan this way is on this side, it's now not going to swell up. Seitan tends to expand as it cooks, especially in like a simmering liquid or things like that. So by frying that side, it's kind of like the same thing as wrapping it, but you're wrapping it with crust, which tastes good. So that way you don't have to unwrap it later. I also like to just give it a little push all around so that it's making good contact with the pan. And if it starts to stick, don't be afraid. Get a spatula. Get under there. Scrape it off the pan. It's okay. This one's not sticking that much. Just that one side right there. There we go. See that darker color? That's about as dark as I like it to be. I don't want to go any darker than that. If you don't use oil during this process, you will get that dark color a lot more quickly than if you're using oil. All right, both sides of this one look pretty good. I'm going to take it out of the pan and we'll get our next one in, but not before a little bit more oil. Now, what I was saying before about the oil, if you don't like using oil, I understand. I don't really like to cook with oil myself. But in this case, the oil prevents it from sticking, and we're going to put these into a liquid and simmer them. So I would venture to say most, if not all that oil, is not going to end up on your plate. Yeah, now we're looking much better. I'm going to kill the heat on these. And now both of these steaks are going to go into the simmering liquid. Once our steaks are in the simmering liquid, you want to leave them in there for about 30 minutes. And you want it to be, like I said, just that bare simmer. Korean barbecue wouldn't be Korean barbecue without a sauce. So in a glass bowl, we're going to take a half cup of tamari, 3/4 of a cup of water, 1/2 cup of brown sugar, 1/4 cup of mirin, 1 teaspoon of sesame oil. Those of you that are worried about oil, don't think of sesame oil as oil. Think of sesame oil as a seasoning. Yes, it does have fat and all that kind of stuff like other oils, but it's a flavor enhancer big time. 1 tablespoon of rice wine vinegar, some fresh cracked black pepper. If you really asked, it's probably about 1/2 to 2/3 of a teaspoon. 1/2 teaspoon or to your taste of red pepper flakes. Also to your taste is 1 teaspoon of sriracha. Now, I know red pepper flake and sriracha, they're both spicy, but they're both different. They add different types of flavors and spice to this dish. And they're both optional if you don't want to use them. This does not make for a very spicy sauce this way. You can use fresh garlic, or as I'm doing here, 1.5 tablespoons of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of ground ginger, and our thickener will be 3 tablespoons of cornstarch. And now we want to mix to combine. Make sure there's no lumps. Once that's ready, set it to the side and we'll finish on the meat. All right, so the half hour is up on our steaks. And as you can see, they are roughly the same size that they were, but they're a little different texture now. Just want to get them out of the broth. They firmed up really, really nicely. They're huge. And now I just want those to cool a little bit before we cut them up. Okay, I let these cool for about a half an hour, mostly because I want to move on. So now what I want to do is slice them very, very thin. And when I say very thin, I mean thin, like this kind of thin. We want small strips. This may take a while. See, this is perfect. This is the kind of size we're looking for. About, I guess, 1/8 of an inch or so. And you can see that texture. And it tastes so good. To make it a little easier on myself, I'm just going to cut this one in half, stack it on top, cut them both at the same time. And once the first one's done, obviously, same thing with the second. Just cut that in half, flip it over. Okay, once we have our piles of seitan, now I just want to kind of rough chop through them, make smaller, more bite-sized pieces. This is not crucial. I just like it to be a little smaller. There we go. Chopped seitan, ready to cook again. All right, I got the pan out again with our burner. I suggest doing this on the stove. I'm only doing a burner because it's so much easier to just do it over here where we have the camera set up. But yeah, for you, do a stovetop. Trust me, it's so much easier. I have that pan on about medium heat, and I'm just going to put the meat right into it. Yes, that is a dry pan. There is no oil in there. We don't need it. Okay, once I get all that meat in there, I want to just move it around a little bit. If I find any pieces that are too big, I'll just break them down. I want them to be bite size. Don't have to be crazy about it, but you know, something like that. Oh, there's another one. All right, we got a little bit of sizzle going now. I did turn the pan up a little bit because, you know, I wanted to speed up the process, but you probably don't really want to do that. So I'm going to put it back down to 3 out of 5 because ours only goes to 5. And then remember that sauce we made earlier? Give that another quick whisk and dump in. I'm going to go with a little over half because I just don't trust volumes. I always think there's going to be too much liquid and I don't want too much liquid. You want to just move this around, get everything coated. I did just turn the heat to 4 because 4 felt right. And I think we can add all the sauce. And this is where the magic starts to happen. As that sauce heats up, the starches will coagulate and thicken it up, making it stick to every bit of that Korean seitan barbecue. You do not really want to walk away at this point. You want to, keep an eye on it, keep it stirring, move it around. You don't want anything to stick or burn. There's a significant amount of sugar in that sauce, so it will burn if you just leave it alone. Okay, when you see it start bubbling a little bit, turn the heat down just a touch. I'm back down to like 3.5 because I do not want to scorch this sauce. You can see as I pull away, it's starting to gelatinize a bit in there. All right, once that sauce is thickened, I can cut the heat, and I'm just going to move this to the side. Okay, as a condiment, there's a lot of things you can use. One of the things that I like is just a little bit of green onion or scallion. As you can see, our rice is also done. Just grab a bowl, some of our rice in the bowl. Then on top of the rice, put a little bit of our barbecue. Top it with some scallions. And there we have vegan Korean barbecue. All right, it's time to give this a taste. Get a little bit of everything on that fork. All right, if you like Korean barbecue, this is the way to go. As always, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on The Bistro.